I am calling this meeting to order. Can everyone please be seated? There are 2 items to be added to the agenda. Can I have someone to move
So moved.
that the rules of procedure be suspended to permit the addition of 2 items to the agenda without notice? 1, expression of interest in United Shoreline Ontario Rally, open agenda. 2, Durham Live minor variance applications, closed agenda, pursuant to section 239, 2E of the Municipal Act. Litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Do I have a mover?
So moved.
Councillor Lee. I declare the resolution carried. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Next. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests?
No.
None? Moving forward. Adoption of minutes.
Move to adopt the minutes.
You're moving it up. So we have 3 sets of minutes. We have 3.1, regular meeting, November 11th, 2019. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bauer. Second, 3.2, closed session meeting, November 11th, 2019. Do I have a mover? Mayor Collier. 3.3, 2020 capital budget and 2021 to 2024 long-range capital forecast, December 2nd, 2019. Moved by Regional Councillor
I'm not moving it, but I have an amendment, please.
An amendment by Mayor Collier.
Go ahead.
Yes, please, Mayor Collier.
Just under project number CAO002, the corporate branding, it says it's been pushed out for the 75th anniversary. It's actually the 70th anniversary. Minor.
We'll make that correction.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Just to clarify, by approving the minutes, we're not actually ratifying the budget at that point.
That's correct.
That's it, Council.
Okay, thank you.
Point of order, do we have to vote on them individually? If we're moving them individually?
Ideally.
Okay. All right.
So call the vote on the first set.
Okay, okay. All in favor of the first set? Carries. In favor of the second set? Carries. In favor of the third set?
As amended.
Carries as amended. Any opposed for the 3 sets? Motion carries.
You're good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very
All right.
good.
We'd like now to move on to the consent agenda. The following items have been pulled. 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, 4.6, 4.9.
Move the rest.
Yeah, move the balance.
And the balance has been moved by Councillor Crawford, Regional Councillor Crawford. Okay, so
So we vote on it.
All in favor?
all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I'd like now to pull 4.1, first pulled by Councillor Sterling Lee.
Just want to move that council adopt option A, door-to-door delivery for the ward newsletter.
May I ask Chair just that the council hold his recommendation just so we have a chance to speak and discuss some questions to staff before we have the motion on the
Sure,
floor?
I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Next, who pulled it was Regional Councillor Crawford.
I just wanted to say that I'm in support of option A. Had a few conversations recently with some seniors, and while many of them are forward-thinking and have, email and social media, we still have a large demographic that does not have this and won't ever have it. And in her opinion, and it makes sense, we're probably 5 to 10 years too early to go completely electronic. So out of respect for the fact that we've just had an age-friendly strategy go through, I think that it's important that we respect the fact that some of our residents would like to have a paper copy a couple times a year. So I'm in support of option A.
Okay, thank you, Regional Councillor Crawford. The third to pull it was Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. Just through you to, I guess, Ms. Jarvis wrote this. Under option A, it talks about considerations would require an increase in budget and staff resources to develop. Can you just speak to the quantity? Can you quantify the staff resources that are going to be required? Because we have a dollar amount to prepare it, Well, what's that equate to as far as staff time as well?
Through the
Please.
chair. So for that, I was speaking more about, if we're having 3 separate newsletters, that are 11 by 17, 2-sided, all of that, there's gonna be additional staff resources to be going through the content, content editing. Currently, right now, for example, with Ajax today, for the council message, it's 150 words. That enough takes quite a bit of staff time
Mhm.
to do, to keep track of, edit, to get that in the current Ajax today. So a big part of that would be staff resources to add the document, any editing that may be needed, and then of course our graphic designer creating the 3 separate documents.
Okay, well, and I guess I'll rephrase it and maybe we can get a number, because I'm, like, this is not for me, this is for council support, and that's fine. If this is what council wants, I'm fine with that. But I just want to make sure that we're not going into this just thinking it's just the dollar value of, first of all, I'm assuming we're gonna do the Metroland total, if this is the option we go with.
Through the chair, that's up to council to decide what option we go with.
Okay, but, okay, so let's say you go with the door-to-door total of $11,027. I want everybody to be very clear, it's not $11,027, it's $11,027 plus whatever the staff time component is for this, which is a number. And what I don't wanna see is in our operating budget come forward that we need another staff position to support this, because that would be a heck of a lot more than the cost of newsletters. So, can you speak to that first, and then I'll.
Through the chair, in terms of staff resource, we don't anticipate that we would need to increase another graphic designer with this. It's just that this is just another project that would be on top of their already regular work plan, and that may bump other priorities that we're working on as well, but it just needs more time in terms of.
Just go back to that, what priorities would need to be bumped to accommodate?
Well, just in terms of, when we're looking at work plans, this would be another initiative that would be put on there as part of it, so it's just an increase in what that would look like. But we don't anticipate that this would require an additional graphic designer.
Okay, and if this was approved today, whichever option, is this a pilot type thing that we can try for a year or 2 and then revisit it? Or is this just this is what we're doing from here going forward?
Through the chair, as this is part of a policy that we're looking for approval, that we don't see this as a pilot, but we see this as practice moving forward.
Okay. I'll support whatever, I've spoken about this before, and once the motion comes back, I'll speak a little bit more, but I'll support whatever option council wants on this, but I would want it to be on a trial basis with staff reporting back after a set amount of time, just to let us know exactly what the real figures are, and what, if there's a way that we can gauge what the public has got out of this. Okay, because maybe we don't need Ajax today going forward, right? My suggestion before was that this be included as part of Ajax today, which is one of the options, but if that's not the option that's chosen, I would like to have some way we can sort of take the pulse on this in a year or 2 and report back and see where we are.
Through the chair, if that's something that council would like to see, then that can be part of the discussion today and the decision moving forward. And back and reporting on it.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mayor Cutler. Thank you, Ms. Reyes. It was pulled also by Regional Councillor Dines.
Thank you. Just to add to that, I mean, both those things are important to have the balance, I think, with the political newsletters, which we put a lot of information in what's going on, but also from the corporate perspective, that's important. Finding the balance is going to be tricky. I also agree with Regional Councillor Crawford in that, you know, there are many people that don't have the ability to have the software and all the latest computers today in their homes due to the economics of it, and that's always going to be there. So there's still, in order to reach everybody, we need to give them a hard copy or an option to do both. So I think that's really important too. So I'm open to what council decides at the end of the day, but I just think that those 2 things have to be considered. I had a question, sorry, it was, in the actual policy, it's page 27. It's 4.3.5. And it talks about the following enhancements that may be requested, and in there is a listing of approved regional and council resolutions. And in brackets, it says must have been moved or by or seconded by a councillor. So I just want to ensure that you're not really, are you being specific about that? Or as councillors who, you know, all of us participate in all of our motions, and it's information that I feel is important. If you feel it's important as a councillor, then it's important to communicate that with your constituents. So does that stop us from doing that, talking about whatever our motion was?
Through the chair, so no, that wouldn't prevent you from speaking to any motion that you supported or brought forward, whether it was approved or not, in terms of speaking to it. The intention behind this was about providing some enhancements to the current council profiles on ajax.ca. And an option in there would be to just have a listing of approved council motions that perhaps the council member had brought forward or seconded. It was just another opportunity to profile approved positions on our corporate channels. On our corporate resources like ajax.ca, we typically only list or promote or profile approved council positions through our corporate channels. So that was the intention behind that listing.
So that's still in place, though, even if it didn't specify that in this policy?
This is in this policy, this is a new enhancement that we would be bringing forward. It's not currently on.
So I'm not really sure what the intent is here, but I don't really think that specifying that is something because it can be interpreted many ways. I think it causes a bit of confusion. And at the end of the day, we're all part of that process and should be able to put it on whatever we want, if we want to speak to it. I just want to make sure that that is allowed. Because, you know, the measure of success isn't always an emotion.
Yeah, through the chair, just to provide clarity around why we presented this option. It was again just as an enhancement that could be requested to your council profile on ajax.ca. And it was just an option for anything that you had brought forwarded or seconded. And again, it would be an approved council position. So that's what the intention was there. If this isn't something that council would want to move forward from, then we would just remove 4.35.
Well, I would like to see that removed. I just don't see what the purpose of that is. I don't understand it. And if any councillor wants to include any of that information, they're free to do that. So it's being very prescriptive.
Just again, just to provide clarity around that point, it's just that it's a corporate resource, ajax.ca, and what we do is we would be promoting approved council positions on there, so that's why it would only be speaking to motions that were moved or seconded in that specific area. But that does not prevent you from speaking to anything that you supported within your bio or anything like that, but this was just to provide like a listing. That was the intention behind it.
Don't get it. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report, for the information and the options. I agree with some of the points that have been made. Definitely the fact that there are residents in all of our wards that would prefer or only be able to receive a paper copy. But I think ideally I would like to see us moving towards option B, which is an e-newsletter, with a limited number of printed copies that the councillors would decide on. But I know that that's probably not a feasible idea today because we don't have enough email addresses. So I will also support what we all decide to do. But I just wanted to ask about one of the points for considerations of the e-newsletter was we'll only reach those signed up to receive electronic ward updates, need to build ward emailing listings. So when you put that in the report, have you had any thoughts yet or ideas about how we can do that? And specifically, if we do go with a paper one or whatever option we have, I really feel strongly we need to push the gathering of those email addresses.
Through the chair, yeah, there's several ways that we can build those key ward news lists through the board meetings that are through a sign up through the council pages as well on ajax.ca. So we can leverage all of our communications channels to really be promoting and encouraging people to sign up to these various newsletters. And we can look at, the community events that are held as well as, where there's opportunities where people can opt in and subscribe to these specific newsletters.
Thank you. So then, I guess the next portion of my question would be, so I would love to see us with the ideal goal of moving towards e-newsletters, but at what point, I guess we would decide that, or I don't know who would decide that, at what point do we think we have enough email addresses that we can stop paper and go to email? Is that, should I be asking you guys?
So through the chair, the thing about the direct delivery is that we know exactly where the homes are and how to get the information directly there. With emails, it's all about having people opt in. So I think that should council decide that, you want us to kind of come back and report on kind of the e-lists that we have, as well as the kind of pickup of the print newsletter as well, then that would give us an opportunity to come back and to provide that information.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other remarks, questions?
So again, I'll move that council adopts option A, the door-to-door delivery, as our method of newsletter communication to our residents.
Okay. Do I ask all in favor?
No, you ask if there's questions first on it.
Okay.
Ask if there's questions.
Are there questions on Sterling Lee's recommendation? Mayor Collier?
Lisa says.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. So, I'm not sure where at this point can we ask for your motion with, I'd like my comments included, that we stipulate a stop point or a checkpoint or a gathering process of emails in our newsletter.
So friendly amendment then for the next 3 years. So 2020 to 2023. And then next council, it's after the election, can then decide whether they want to pursue that or change it or go from there. We can check email levels at that point. We can see how many emails we develop and gather over 3 years, should be the intent. But then whether as to setting minimums now, I don't know the efficacy of the newsletter now. So I wouldn't know what my personal threshold would be of 10,000, 20,000 emails from my ward before I'm comfortable exclusively distributing it electronically.
Can I move forward?
So sorry, can you say what?
I maybe
How
can
would
help
that
on
sound?
this.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm finished for now.
Thank you. Mayor Collier?
I just want to, just an amendment to the amendment, just what I spoke of before, and I understand through the policy that this is not going to run during the election year. So, we already know that this is for the next 2 years, and then it will stop. So what I would like to do is just do an amendment to the option A, door-to-door, and that staff report back at the end of the 2 year, and just call it a pilot, call it a trial period, whatever, but at the end of the 2 years, staff report back with the sort of the statistics on, and I'm sure Alex can word this way better than I'm saying it, but with the statistics on where we are as far as the email distribution list, what the response has been, just with the feedback on this project, since it will not be running in the election year anyway. I think 2 years would probably be a good test. And does that satisfy what you're asking?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so that would be my amendment.
Thank you. Sorry?
So through the chair, just we can provide ongoing updates to council members as well in terms of the e-newsletter list as well, and the numbers and how those are working as well, just to keep everybody informed of those lists and how they're being built.
Thank you.
Yes.
Happy to friendly amendment, to vote on for me.
Accept that as a friendly amendment? Okay.
We're good?
Just to speak to it quickly, just the amendment, like I said, this is the sport council, so it's what council decides, so this is fine. I was vocal before in that I think we've, with the Ajax Today, done a good job, and the new Ajax Today that has just come out has a piece from every member of council, and they're very personalized. Everybody said, this is what I've done. There's a lot of eyes in there, which is great. Like everybody's saying, these are the things I brought to the table, these are the things I think are important. I think we've captured it there. But if council feels this is the way they need to go, that's fine. But I'm happy that it will be a 2-year period, and we will have a revisit, and we'll see where we are going ahead. So I'll support that when it comes forward. Thank you.
Any other questions, remarks, discussion? Okay. I need a mover to approve recommendations.
It's moved by
Been moved by Sterling. All in favor? Carries.
as amended.
As amended. Carries as amended. I'd like now to pull 4.2. Pulled first by Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Sorry, on the next one. Sorry. Unless Devin wanted to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Jarvis.
Bye,
Ms. Ray.
guys.
So through the chair to Ms. Cruciano, in terms of expectations or high side, what can the town hope to make off of this in an ideal situation from your point of view? You've studied what other municipalities are charging, you've compared like municipalities. Based on the number of buildings we have, do you have a number that you can possibly give us of what we can hope to expect from this naming rights policy?
Okay, through the chair, thank you for the question. At this time, it's really tough to tell what the expected is. These are high value and relatively infrequent agreements that do happen within municipal spaces. Some municipalities have been able to generate, $1 million, $2 million a year in revenue, and others have generated about $25,000 in revenue. So it really does vary between municipality. I think as a goal, we would love to see, staff would love to see somewhere between 2 and 3 agreements within a calendar year to be explored and to be negotiated. But the values of those will vary so much between different spaces that I'm a little hesitant to speculate, but I think staff would be, I'm comfortable saying that, it would be definitely a net positive.
I mean, I hope so, right? And as a follow-up, ultimately, the policy was written out that council will not be able to influence negotiations. It's done through the CEO's office, which is good. I like that. But just in terms of where the money goes and how it's spent afterwards, once we get it, will it ultimately go into a reserve? Can council dictate where that money goes after that?
So through the chair, as part of the policy, we have that any of the recommendations that will be put forward to council will include the use for the revenues that are generated. So in some cases, that may be specific to the facility that is being named based upon the way that the agreement was negotiated, and then in other cases it may be something completely different. So it's being done on a case-by-case basis, and it ultimately will always have council approval to do so, with involvement, of course, from the finance department.
And the way it's envisioned, do you think we can ever put this money towards operating budget, for example, to help alleviate the tax burden on the resident?
Through the chair, that is always an option that can be considered by the CAO's office. That will be put forth as a recommendation to
Great.
council.
It's a fantastic report. I'm glad we're getting started with this. It was one of our priorities as soon as we started. And so, I've always suggested Tostitos Community Center is a great name. So please reach out to Frito-Lay for us. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'd like to call Mayor Collier.
Thank you, Chair. And Council has asked a few of my questions. We had a brief discussion on this morning, the CEO and I, and felt that it's important not to be limiting council on what the funds can be used for. Whoever wants to do naming may have stipulations. We may want to use it for operating, we may want to use it for another project. But we do have our long-range capital forecast. So one thing I don't want to see is be marching on a lot of capital projects when we already have a long list. So I would like to see this money as something we could allocate to whoever need be at the time. So I'm glad that's left open. Just this is another form of non-tax revenue. So anything that we get from this is bonus. And this goes along the same line as we talked about with our strategic plan, developing non-tax revenue, which is just another tool for us to use. And I'm glad to see it come forward. So this is going to take effect immediately.
Through the chair, that's correct. Once the policy is approved by council, staff will begin sort of looking at our existing assets that we can look to sort of put out to the community and to the relevant stakeholders to explore these opportunities.
Okay, and I'd be happy to move the recommendation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Regional Councillor Dice.
Thank you.
So I'm glad to see here that, that you're gonna develop and maintain a registry of appropriate properties. We haven't had an opportunity to talk about this out in the community and get some feedback from the community. And I've heard little bits and pieces of what other communities have gone through this, and there's some concerns raised. So I think it's important that maybe through our work meetings, we can discuss this issue and maybe get some feedback for you. I know that there are some people that, you know, feel very attached to their facilities because they feel that they've helped. They've seen them build it and they've lived here a long time and they've put all of their tax dollars into that. So I think it's important to have that conversation. Also wanted I'm curious about the list or the registry of appropriate facilities because of the heritage component to that, and wondered if it will be possible when that list is ready that if there are heritage properties listed, that the Heritage Advisory Committee has a discussion on that as well. Because again, you know, it speaks to the history, the names often distinctly tied to the history of the building.
Through the chair, absolutely, we'd be happy to come to any ward meetings and be completely transparent in any of the properties or assets that will be considered for naming rights. And as for the heritage designations, within the policy it speaks to, first of all, if any unsolicited offers are provided to us for properties that we maybe didn't have considered on a list, that would be something that we would obviously engage the relevant stakeholders, including the Heritage Advisory Committee, about how we best could, if it's a good idea to explore, or the reasons why it may not be. But ultimately, this will be, the goal of this is, if we are looking at heritage properties, it will be done so in very specific circumstances as prescribed in the policy, that will take into consideration the sensitivities around those properties, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, for the report. So I just had a couple questions. So, when you have a list in mind, or when the list starts being compiled of possible facilities, will that also include sort of, I know you don't want to have parameters or it's case by case, but will there be sort of a minimum, you know, we will sort of look at offers for naming rights starting at this, like you'll have suggested amounts as well?
So through the chair, what I want to clarify, the purpose of the list is less to be prescriptive of these are the only facilities that we would consider naming. It's more of a public-facing document so that to ensure that we're being transparent about the fact that we are soliciting these opportunities and that we're open to having these conversations. As for a minimum dollar value, this policy outlines that any we're defining a naming rights opportunity as something with an annual value of at the very least $10,000. But with that said, these are sort of by definition a higher value and sort of extend beyond our sort of standard corporate sponsorship or advertising work that we currently do.
Okay, great, thank you.
And just further to that, Councillor Bauer, we want to make sure again that we're as flexible as possible, right? So I think that that's an important message, that we want to be flexible. We want to be able to discuss with stakeholders, discuss with our business community, and determine what's right and what makes sense for that particular facility. And remember, every naming rights agreement would come back before you. So council will always have that opportunity to review the value and to determine if that's appropriate.
Okay, perfect, thank you. As well, so is it just the opportunity for someone to put their name on a facility, or do they have any other, I don't want to say influence, but any other ability to interact in decisions? For example, at the hockey rinks, there's boards that have advertising. So let's say TD Bank wants to sponsor the ACC naming rights, but Royal Bank wants to have a board in there. So it's competing, or something like that. So is it just the name and not anything else?
Through the chair, it would depend on the negotiation that we have with the individual corporation that's interested in providing the naming rights. There may be opportunities where there is an element of exclusivity, but there would obviously come with a higher value in the agreement that would allow for that. But it will all be evaluated on a case-by-case basis as part of the negotiations for the agreement.
Okay. Great, thank you for this.
Thank you for your questions, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Tyler Moore.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report. Alternate revenue streams always gets a positive reaction when I ask people about them, especially coupled with the name recognition must not duly detract from the character, integrity, aesthetic, quality, or safety. That's a really good distinction, and I think that speaks to a lot of people's concerns when you do mention naming rights, so good on that being there. I've had a few people ask me if a certain building or a certain area gets naming rights and the town gets $1 million. Would there be any kind of proprietary allocation of those funds to that specific building? So if the Ajax Canada, or the Ajax Community Center becomes the Ajax Home Depot Community Center, just as an example, just I'm wondering if there's something that we would look at as a case by case basis, or if there's a policy we could put in, so say, well, that building would then automatically get, 20% of those revenues would go to the building. I just wondered if people would be more, again, as Councillor Dice said, people, like where they go and they sort of get attached to them. And I wonder, it's just something to think about. I don't know if that's something we could look at as a council later, but I wanted to inject that in because it was asked of me by a few people. So whether or not it's the village or whether or not it's the building in the downtown core or maybe the Ajax Community Center, could we automatically say this many percentage goes into this building rather than none? What are we getting out of it, like kind of thing. Anyway,
So,
it's more of a comment than a question.
through the chair, just to acknowledge that, and that's why we built this policy to be as flexible and as open as it is, to allow for those conversations to happen. That if the Home Depot, as your example, approached us and said, but we really, we want 20% of that, of whatever the value is to be invested back into capital projects within the facility, that would be something that, of course, we would be open to discussing. That would ultimately come to council for approval. But again, we're at a very early stage of embarking on this, and I think it's there is a point within the policy that requires staff to update council annually on the program. So in those opportunities, it may be identified by council that we may want to adjust elements of the policy.
And through Chair, if I may, a quick follow-up. Yeah, I just meant to say that if we got $1 million, then they would know automatically 25% goes to the building, and if they asked us, say, what do you do with the money? It's just an idea that I think might work well with the synergy of why did you name it? Yes, thank you so much for the report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank you.
Tyler Moore. Regional Councillor Dice.
So just one further question then. It's proposed here for recommendation today. So if we do go back to our communities and have that discussion, there's time for you then to take in the information and tweak it if necessary?
Through the chair, it would changes to the policy could happen at the next annual update that staff provide, or if there's a desire by council to make a change, we could always come back.
So is there a big rush?
We'd like to get started with this policy.
I know, but it means that it doesn't allow us that time to have conversations with people as to how they feel. So if Councilor Moran's feeling the same, or hearing some issues, and we've heard some issues, and maybe we need to have a conversation.
Through the council, we would be very open to coming around and speaking to constituents and putting a communication plan around this out to stakeholders. But we would really like this policy to be in place for the new year, and so we can embark on that, but at the same time, go around and speak to people just in terms of updating.
So have there been some interest expressed already? Is that right?
Yes.
And so we're leading somebody else's timeline?
No.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councilor Dice and the questions that have been asked. The purpose of the policy coming forward today is basically to open the doors and say we're open for business for people to come forward to, well, first of all, for staff to be able to go out and seek any interest, but also if there are any interested stakeholders out there to start discussions with us. But at the end of the day, if you've gone to your award meetings or any councillor hasn't heard concerns, when these proposed agreements come back to council, you can say, I've heard from my constituents that is not something that they want to see, so that I'm not willing to support them. We haven't developed a list yet, and we haven't finalized exactly how all of these negotiations are going to go, because we're trying to keep it as flexible as possible. So to Councillor Rob Tellerant's question, for instance, Home Depot comes and says, you know, we want $1 million, right, but 25, well, that's all part of the negotiations. That's all something that would come back to you for your consideration. So it's still it's wide open, and yes, we can take your comments into consideration when we're entering into the negotiations.
I think that's important to at least have this conversation, because there will be some differences in people's thinking, so.
Absolutely.
I think we have to take that into consideration, so we can do that annually, or we can do it on a case-by-case basis.
Yes.
And through the chair, your recommendation to go out to the public is great. Like, I think that the more they know about this policy and the more they become comfortable with it, they'll be more aware, they're more in a direction. And so when we do come back to council, they're not surprises, right? So I think that that's important, and we'll take that message and make sure that we're communicating the policy out to stakeholders and at your board meetings.
Thank you very much. Any other questions on 4.2? Mayor Collier is happy to move to approve the recommendation to this report. All those in favor?
Happily.
Any opposed? Carries. We'd like now to move on to 4.3. Thank you, Ms. Cruciano and Mr. McClarty. 4.3, 2019 operating budget forecast by Mr. Al. Floor is yours. And it's being pulled by Deshaun. Okay, Mayor Collier, floor is yours.
Sorry, just gotta get back on the page here. 4.3. Thank you for the report. I'm a bit frustrated that this comes out after we've already done our capital budget. This is a number I want to know before we do our capital budget, at least a projection of what the surplus is going to be of the year. Is that something we can push to have next year before capital budget, so we sort of have an idea? Because I know at the region, I've already, on transit, on a number of other things, we already know what our projected surpluses are.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, typically there's a budget timetable that lists out all the timelines. As you understand, this year has been a bit of a tough year. We've been double dutying, so the intention was for the report to come earlier, but because of picking up additional tasks, it has been delayed. But we can certainly take that into consideration as we're developing the 2020 timetable to ensure that this report comes earlier.
Okay, because you're well aware of my comments on the general levy allocation and potentially looking at reducing by the surplus, maybe going forward, not this year, but something I at least want to be able to look at, because if we're consistently having a surplus year after year, I understand also that we're looking at the financial sustainability plan this year, 2021 as well, 2020 as well. So,
If I can, through the chair to Mayor Collier. The other point I do want to make on this report, it is a projected surplus at this point in time. I mean, there's so many unknowns. We could have crazy weather for the rest of the remaining 2 weeks, and winter control can influence the operating budget surplus, and it can be reduced. It is based on actuals as of August 31st with 4 months of projections in here. So just wanted to make sure that comment.
okay. Just down to the page 41 of the report, the tax increment financing, we're talking about Pat Bailey Square, the medallion development there, I assume.
True, sure, correct.
And the estimate foregone revenue. I'm not completely clear about this, and we talked about this morning, was if they're paying us, and I understand they're getting a reduction, if they're paying us and then we're paying them back, that difference to me still goes into the budget. Is that what this says?
To the chair, to Mayor Collier, yes, we do collect the taxes as part of the assessment role. I've been informed by taxation that we cannot change that. We do collect it and then we put it aside to be repaid to Medallion 80% at this point. That's our understanding. We're still trying to go through the agreement. Mr. Romanowski and I are still trying to understand clearly what the agreement says and what is defined so that we can plan, because this is just the beginning. This is the first year it's actually on the assessment.
Okay, well, it's just, I wanted to make that point to council, because this is relevant to the later report that's coming about the CIP. And that's just an instance right there of over $250,000 that we're we're having to find. Those are my only questions on that. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions, remarks, comments on 4.3? None. I need a mover to approve recommendations to the report. Moved by Councillor Lee. All in favor? Any opposed? Carries. Now I'd like to pull 4.4, pulled by Mayor Collier.
Again, sorry.
Again. Quite all right.
This was actually a really eye-opening report because I wasn't aware that there wasn't a policy for the library on this. And Ms. Paredes, I might have some questions for you.
Please approach the bench.
I think we're all familiar that with the police budget, the police basically have the facility to reallocate surplus within their budget within the year. And I found that out because, you know, as an accountant looking at forecasts, when they came in at break even every year, that sets off spidey senses. So I started asking questions, and that's why they could reallocate their surplus during the year. So to me, this sort of speaks to the same as being, you know, we've identified that there has been a surplus that's been carried forward over the years. So now basically this report is saying, okay, we're gonna cap you at the 200,000. I just wonder, and maybe Donna, this might not be to you, this might be to finance, but just wondering, you know, at the local level, we can reallocate our surplus during the year. Our surplus, as per the financial sustainability plan, has to go into certain reserves, as we just saw in the report immediately before this. Why are we doing it differently for the library?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier, we were just trying to put a framework in place between the library and the town in terms of the principles of how we operate. The practice has been over the years for the library to keep the surplus. The surplus has grown to a high number, and we are every year, the library is coming to the town for a grant request. So at this point, we thought the money had gotten pretty high, so we were just going to take some back. But at the same time, understanding that if there's an emergency at the library, basically, we don't want them to be coming knocking on our door for everything. So we wanted to get the rules we play by, just put a policy in place, endorsed by council, and give the flexibility in terms of the library having a bit of money in case of an emergency, and giving back the excess that it.
Okay. When was the last time the library had a $200,000 emergency?
Not in my 10 years here.
That's kind of my point. I think it's a large amount still. But I also don't, from a financial point of view, agree with allowing the library to have different rules of operating than we have. And where I'm going with this is back to what I just said in my last comments in the last report. We're allowing the library to take their surplus and reduce their operating by the surplus amount. But we can't do that at the town level.
Through the chair, I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, the library's grant request is small in comparison to the town's budget. It is one-time funds, which we don't always recommend, but at the same time, it does relieve a bit of pressure in the library grant request. It is not sustainable. This year is really high. I mean, I have no idea if there is even going to be a projected surplus in future years for the library. I don't know. The library's surplus has accumulated this over a number of years to actually become this high amount. Generally, it's not this high. So.
Okay. I don't remember what it's called. It used to be tax rate stabilization. What's it called? Capital contingency?
It's called tax rates. It's a stabilization reserve.
Stabilization reserve. So this would be, in essence, a library stabilization reserve. I just want to understand that it's only to be used in the event of a deficit. It's not a fund that can just be, oh, we need to do this. Because we still have to stick to our budgets. So I don't want this to be we have this reserve here that we can use throughout the year because we want this. Please.
Can I respond to that? I think that, I can't speak to what's happened prior to my tenure at the library, but we've never run an operating deficit. And we have, and it's obviously, the proof is in the pudding that we have this surplus. I firmly believe that we ask for what we need in the operating budget discussions, and we try to spend that. I know that a budget is only as good as the day it's written and the day it's approved, and things happen during the course of the year. We've been able to manage our money responsibly, and over 10 years, plus 10 years, this amount has grown. So I don't anticipate that future future CEOs would go crazy and spend against it, because we haven't done that.
So, and I'm just trying to understand, why wouldn't we just, instead of leaving 200 there as a reserve, why wouldn't you just take the whole amount and put it in the town's capital contingency? And if at the end of the year, the library has a deficit or any kind of shortfall, then we just top it up from that contingency.
Through the chair to Mayor Collar, again, we were.
From that reserve, sorry, not from that reserve.
We wanted to give the library the flexibility to be able to handle any sort of unknown emergency. There is a defined policy that's attached to this report that specifies the usage of, if the library was to tap into this reserve, there's specified usage. We do also have a finance person that is dedicated to the library. We go through all the library's financials, we review their reports, we review their budgets, we review their actuals, their audited statements, they're integrated with ours. So we do have sufficient control in place to be able to see if the library is not following that policy and utilizing funds without permission. So we felt very comfortable establishing a reserve and letting the library handle it.
Will we be notified if the library has to allocate this reserve at the time, or will we just find out at the end?
I think the policy, the recommendation to council was that the library report on its operating budget quarterly, and on the need, what the progress is of our expenses and revenues.
Okay, so we'd be notified on a quarterly basis if this needed to be accessed. Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the policy.
I don't like it, but I'm willing to give it a try. So I'll be asking the same questions next year, so we'll see where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on 4.4, library reserve and policy? Any comments? Okay. Councillor Lee has moved this to approve the recommendations for the report. All in favor? Any opposed? This carries. Good news, we get to skip one. Now we're on to 4.6. Mayor Collier.
Sorry. Very quick. Comments here. Okay. Who decides what constitutes someone being disrespectful, intolerant, or what is harassment, and when a resident has crossed the line?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would really be on a case-by-case basis, and it would be the decision of the staff members that are involved. So this policy is empowering staff to apply this policy based on the review of the circumstances, and a case-by-case basis, they would be looking at that.
But this, if I understand, is for council as well, right? It says right at the start.
It could be for interactions with members of council, yes.
Public conduct policy be approved, yeah, and members of council. So this applies to, we'll say, if someone was disrespectful to one of us as well. So it's not just staff, that's correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I feel that someone, and this specifically says not social media, which I'll get to that, because I think that's where this probably would have the most effect. And I'll give you an example. If I feel that somebody has been disrespectful or is being harassing or, something, how does this apply? Because but then is that up to a staff member, the CEO, or somebody else to decide whether it is or is not?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that would be a conversation that would start with the CAO's office to determine kind of where the boundaries are on that and what specifically has happened and how you feel about it.
Okay.
I think Mr. Baker wants to chime in.
Through you, Mr. Chair, as an example, we had an incident in the past year where a resident had sent some very disrespectful emails to a member of council. The member of council brought it to my attention, and I agreed that it was disrespectful. We did not have a policy in place, so we sought out policies that were in other areas, and to find what type of course of action was accepted practice out there. I ended up sending a letter to the resident, and then had actually a very productive conversation with the resident. What you have before you here today is a result of us, of staff, thinking it's prudent for us to actually have a policy in place that we can, that the public can be made aware of, so that they know exactly the process that we're going to be following if these types of things arise, whether it be disrespect or bad behavior towards members of council or staff, which actually is becoming more and more frequent throughout our business.
Thank
Yes.
you.
If I could just add, and I don't want to preempt your question on social media, but I just wanted to clarify that the purpose of the policy before you is really a framework for how we address inappropriate behavior. It's not intended to be an exhaustive list of what we consider to be appropriate versus inappropriate behavior. And the way that the policy is framed is that it would assist in the application of codes of conduct where they exist elsewhere. So to give you a couple examples of that, recreation would have codes of conduct for its facilities. We have our council procedure bylaw, which places some limitations on people's behavior in public meetings. Rachel in her team in communications has some framework for how they deal with behavior on social media. So all of those things exist separate and apart from this policy. This is really the overarching framework for how we can address violations under other documents that establish acceptable behavior.
So, I don't think that staff are going to, that residents are going to speak to staff the same way as they speak to some of us sometimes. I hope they don't.
Devin. Devin gets an earful. So.
Okay, well, except Devin, sorry Devin. But let's give you an example, a live example in this very room when a resident walks up to me and goes, "You're an effing liar." Would that be harassment or would that be disrespectful?
Yeah.
So what would be the repercussions for that resident?
We'll go through the procedure.
Would they be banned from town facilities?
We would have to, we would deal with it on a case-by-case basis, but at least there's a process in place that we can look through to determine how we follow
Okay.
through.
And then this specifically says, it doesn't say our personal social media, it says electronic communications, unofficial town of Ajax social media platforms. What about our personal? When you, for instance, and I'll tell you, I blocked a bunch of people for being disrespectful and harassing and everything else. Now some of these people feel that's disrespectful to them because they feel they should have access to my comments if I discuss a town matter. If somebody asks a question and I reply, they feel they should have access to that. I feel differently. So this specifically says not Ajax social media, what about our own social media? If people are being disrespectful to us on our own social media, I just block them, but if they challenge that, does this have any teeth?
No, so the purpose of this policy is to govern more, the intent was more to govern our facilities, behavior within our facilities, interactions in person and by email. Social media of all kinds is deliberately outside the scope of this policy. That's a whole other nut to crack and something that I feel should be led by corporate communications.
If we're gonna do this policy, I feel we should have it inclusive, and we should include that, because that, to me, is a huge part of the issue I'm seeing, and probably, maybe not to the same extent some of my colleagues, but definitely that I'm seeing. If we're gonna have this, I think it absolutely needs to have that piece. So would you say I should move that as an amendment to this, to include social media? Or what would be the best way to deal with that? Clerk.
I mean, it could be referred back with direction to put that within the scope. I just, like, we do have a social media policy, and to me, that would be the place where we govern, you know, under what circumstances we can block people from town accounts, what types of behavior are acceptable and not acceptable when it comes to town accounts or social media accounts. I'm just not sure that belongs within this policy, but if your question is a procedural one, then I would suggest you refer it back to staff with direction to include that within the scope of this policy.
Okay, but to be fair, we have a council code of conduct, and we're held to the council code of conduct. So, and I have got an opinion on this from the Integrity Commissioner. And the opinion kind of says that, you know, we have to give people access. So if they say that, then that should be reflected in here, in my opinion. Because I'm fine being, you know, transparent and held accountable, And I'm fine being criticized respectfully, but when they cross the line, you need to have something. So if we're gonna have this policy and we're gonna have the standards that we have to be upheld or held to,
Yes.
should be in here.
There is an entirely separate body of case law that speaks to whether public officials in their public capacities can block people on their social media accounts. Some interesting case law from Ottawa and other places and in the United States. That's not something that we undertook as part of this review. I really feel that is quite a large beast that should be dealt with separately. And I would just say I think some of the department heads who are dealing with this kind of behavior more frequently do feel some urgency to get this policy in place fairly quickly, so I wouldn't want it to be delayed while we examine the social media piece.
Okay, I won't move that. I want to hear what my colleagues have to say, but I may after. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Regional Councillor Danis?
Thank you. Yeah, I understand how the social media piece would be very, very difficult and complicated, and there are all kinds of legalities there. I also understand, though, in my opinion, it's another form of gossip, and you can't control that, ever, in any form. You don't always take it seriously. Some of it's more hurtful than others, and may cross the line, but I think it'd be very, very difficult and time-consuming to monitor all of that. I don't know how that would be done. I think this is a good start, and I just wanted to clarify that what you were speaking to, my understanding is there have been increasing incidents that we need to address, and it is about protecting our staff in the front lines. And it's happening in all of our facilities, not just in the CEO's office, but at the recreation centers, all of these places. So I'm really pleased to see that we have some kind of a system coming forward that we can follow in a process that we'll be able to follow. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Danis. Regional Councillor Lee?
I just want to echo what Regional Councillor Guys was saying. I think it's a good framework that protects our staff and ourselves to a certain degree, but if we're talking about legislating social media, like, when do we become big brother at that point? Like, we are elected officials. We understand that comes with a certain degree of scrutiny and a certain degree of criticism, and that's an unwritten social contract. We accepted taking these roles. But, if people are critical of me, if they're mean to me, I always have the option of not reading that as well. And I would never want the town of Ajax to somehow legislate my personal social media accounts, because I think that's a line that should not be drawn. So I just want to share that. So thank you.
Thank you, Regional Councillor Lee. CEO Baker?
I'm reluctant to wade into this, but if you're speaking, through you, Mr. Chair, if the mayor is speaking about comments that are coming to his, I'm just on its surface without looking into it further, I'm not really in favor of monitoring or enforcing anything on a personal social media account. But if somebody was to be disrespectful to you on your work Facebook, or if you had some type of an account that was set up as a work social media account, I think that's something that, in my view, how is that different than receiving an email? So I think that's something, my suggestion would be that you approve the policy as it is today. We go away, we look at what has been requested by the mayor, do some research, and we can come back with a report later on, but at least the policy's in place for today.
Thank you.
But just as a follow-up, sorry, just so I can finish, but at the same time though, if we receive a rude email, that's, like, if we feel threatened, we can go to the Durham Regional Police Service. If we feel there's an external threat outside of that. But are we saying my feelings are hurt, and as a result, I want this action? Like, I'm wondering, like, where does the CEO see that one?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, the example that I used earlier was through an email, and it was an extremely disrespectful email that was sent to a member of council that was talking about or addressing the member of council through councilor's role on council, specifically to this corporation and the role that they played in this corporation, and we deemed it to be offensive and something that I needed to send a letter about. So, again, case-by-case situation.
Right.
But
I agree.
in that particular case, I absolutely believe that it was something that I need to send a warning about, because it was a very disrespectful email that was sent specifically about the work that counselor does for the corporation.
I just don't want to see us silence dissenting voices or critical voices, because although we don't like to hear them, it also provides a different point of view that we may not have. And I think there is a necessary component of the job of hearing those voices.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, as an example, I think the process that I followed with that one was a warning one.
Right.
Saying, you know, this is what happened, this is what occurred, if it's not correct, please let me know. However, if this behavior continues, I will be forced to take the following steps, i.e. any communication will have to come through me, you can't talk to the individuals, things like that. There's all kinds of different parameters that you can see in the policy. But my preference is always to start with a warning letter.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. I really like this. I think it's a great starting point for sure. When I read it, I was thinking of all the people at the desks, the people that are the front line when customers or residents come in. I've worked in similar customer service related fields, and it can get pretty tough and abusive, and we can't allow that. So I thought of this one as a face-to-face type of interaction, or email or phone maybe. I was happy to see that social media abuse will be taken out and handled separately, because that is a giant beast of its own, where someone might type something on make a really rude comment, but then 20 other people may add to it. And then it ends up on somebody else's face, and then somebody else is attacking. So I think that's too much to put in for this, which I think is frontline protection. And it's actually kind of sad that we need it, but I would prefer that we keep this as is and have a separate policy regarding social media. My 2 cents.
Thank you very much. Mayor Collier, we'd like to close this off.
I'd just like to move an amendment, please, Chair, that just add to the proposed public conduct policy be approved by council, and that staff be directed to report back with options to look at how to address social media. And I'll just speak to it quickly. I do have 2 town official accounts, the mayor's Facebook page and the mayor Twitter account. And again, nobody wants to stifle debate. I'm not talking about hurt feelings. I do think I get it a lot worse than most of you, but that's okay. But the situation is, you know, nobody, whether you're staff or whoever, should be spoken or dealt with in that way. It doesn't matter whether you're a politician or what you are. If that's the standard, that's the standard. So this isn't about that. This is, if it's not okay to talk to staff like that, not okay to talk to us like that. You can be respectful and still criticize and still hold people accountable. And you know, we've all had our public open houses, we've all had, maybe you haven't, but I've had ones where people go over the line and you know, you stop, you say, look, if you're gonna be disrespectful to staff, you're gonna be disrespectful to me, then this is done. And this is kind of goes along those lines. And I'm not talking about just don't read it. It's like, if it's my personal site or if it's your personal site, you should be able to do what you want on your personal site. And if somebody is taking town business and coming at me through my personal page, I want to be able to block them and just be, I don't need to deal with that. You know, through the town, no problem. But outside of town business, I think it needs to be addressed. So I'm fine just giving the direction that staff look into that. Because I'll tell you flat out, they're gonna use the code of conduct, council code of conduct, to try and bypass that. That's what's happening. So I think it's something we need to look at and address. So I'll just make that amendment, please, Chair.
So a question regarding the amendment to staff then, if I may, is don't we have to clear this through lawyers? What is the associated costs related to this? Because we've never had this now. So if you're saying like it's gonna take the lawyer 12 hours to look into this and at $1,000 an hour, then we're saying this policy is worth 12, of taxpayer money to examine. And I don't think there's any sort of urgency for that, in my opinion. So just through your staff.
No, you
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't believe that we've spent anywhere near that looking at this policy as is. Zero. So, even if we did have a solicitor look at this, I wouldn't think it would be more than a couple of hours. I mean, we try not to use stuff like that.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Are we all done on 4.6?
Amendments up.
So I need a mover to approve the recommendation to the report.
The amendment.
Motion on the amendment first.
Motion on
Sorry.
the amendment.
Could you please repeat the amendment?
Just that staff be directed to report back on options to address the social media sites.
Thank you.
Call the vote on the amendment.
Those in favor of the amendment? All in favor? Any opposed? Vote by one. Motion carries.
Now on the motion as amended.
The main motion.
Now, on the motion as amended, I need a mover to approve the recommendations of the report, moved by Councillor Bauer. Good, thank you very much.
All in favor?
You need to vote on the
Ah,
motion.
yes. All in
Let's
favor?
vote again.
Any
Right.
opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we get to skip another one. Skip 4.8. Now I'd like to pull 4.9 by Mayor Collier.
We skip 2.
Oh, yeah, all right. All the-
4.8.
Skip 2. Nope.
Downtown Community Improvement Plan.
So,
Sorry, we're on 4.9?
4.9.
Thank you.
which got set, excuse me, that got set separately. I knew that.
This is on the Downtown Community Improvement Plan, right?
Yes.
I don't have any questions on it. I want to move an amendment. I just think having staff report back by the end of next year is too long. I think we need to look at this sooner rather than later, and I just want to, instead of amend it, instead of prior to December 31st, 2020, amend to prior to June 30th, 2020. Because I want to see this before the summer.
Okay.
That's it.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
If we're talking about it.
Any questions on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment? Amendment carries. Any opposed? No, okay. I need a mover to approve the
I'll move the
recommendation.
motion as amended.
The mayor moved it as amended.
Or vote for it as amended.
Okay.
Did Jeff come back?
Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. I'd like to move on to 4.10. CEO Baker would like to address us on this. Expression of interest in United Shoreline Ontario Rally.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That one.
CAO Baker. Remain
Are
calm.
we?
Welcome, Ms. Matheson.
Delegate
Ms.
Shane.
McLarty. Delegation.
Council's very.
Thank you, members of council, through you, the chair. We've recently had an opportunity present itself to host an environmental, what they're dubbing right now as a rally, in partnership with the United Shoreline Ontario group in early 2020. The reason that we are walking on this motion is that they are looking at January or early February dates. So in order to further investigate, potentially come to some partnership agreement, and then to promote an event would be time prohibitive, I guess, to go to GGC in January. The event is, as proposed, is one of a series that would take place across Ontario, with dates again in January, February, which would raise awareness, including preparedness and emergency response for high water levels. They are talking about the International Joint Commission's Plan 2014, which is related to regulating water levels in the Great Lakes, specifically Lake Ontario. And will serve as an opportunity to build profile for Ajax. Staff feel that this does align with the goals in our 2018-2022 strategic plan. It builds on our climate emergency declaration, which was passed by council in September. It highlights our own concerns and advocacy efforts around climate change, water quality issues impacting Lake Ontario. And then it also serves to allow us to connect and engage with our community. They have had one previous event which drew around 500 people in Trenton, hosted by Mayor Harrison. They do have one date set for the new year in Brighton on January the 23rd, hosted by Mayor Ostrander. So they are hoping to have us be the champions for them on this. They will be sharing resources, preparing handouts, and then they will be doing a little bit of lobbying for the province in terms of funding to properly resource emergency management as it relates to flooding. So these are conversations that we haven't fully dove into or have fully understood at this time, just because the ask did come so recently. But we are asking the council allow us to pursue these conversations so that we can understand if this is a beneficial action for the community, and then to, if deemed appropriate, to act on that and go forward with an event to be determined. This also comes at as a timely request, as we've received through Mayor Collier a email from the Eastern Ontario Mayor's Caucus surrounding this Plan 2014 and resolution connected to that, which was distributed to council, I believe, yesterday. It was brought up at Regional Council on Wednesday, and the resolution will be dealt with at the February 2020 meeting of Regional Council. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Matheson. Councillor Lee?
Through the chair to staff, I wasn't aware this is something you needed our permission to have these conversations. I thought you would be having these conversations regardless. So like, to the conversations we obviously have no problem with, but to host the event, we need to make that decision today is what you're saying?
So we need to understand that should we feel it align properly with our goals, that you would be okay with us pursuing this, yes.
But then, I guess, from a town point of view and official, like, what are our goals then? Have we ever, like, this shoreline thing it's been happening for a while, but
yes,
we've only since been talking about it somewhat recently. Like, does the town have an official position on this?
Well, and this group has come to previous councils before. I believe 2018 was the most recent presentation that they've made. Again, just talking about water levels and those impacts on the shoreline communities. So, of course, with the climate emergency resolution that came in September, we did feel that if there was ever a time for us to partner with a group like this on this question, that it would make sense and aligns with us at this point now.
So to further to what Ms. Matheson is saying, it's been a very topical conversation at our at TRCA as well as CLOCA as well. So the two associations are talking about this, and CLOCA, as you know, has presented information on their findings associated with this. They've been in to make some, I believe, you would have received the presentation. They're going to the region with the presentation. In terms of TRCA, they're working on this as well. They are looking at what the measurements are for our area and our waterfront specifically. And I know that they've got tools within the, I believe they're measuring right now as we speak, like they've got cameras within or a tool that they're using to measure that. So I'm not sure when we're going to get that information from TRCA, but these are things that are happening. It's currently happening.
Oh, no,
and things have changed with flooding in 2017 and 2019. So it's definitely becoming topical. And I believe TRCA was in to talk to the CAO as well of their program around shoreline.
I'm more asking specifically, like, if the town itself doesn't have a position that council's voted on, and we agreed to do this seminar based on aligned principles. Like, I don't know where we stand officially as a council. I know how I stand, but that'd be different from 6 other people. So you're asking us to approve of a rally which will have specific benchmarks or objectives, but I don't know that that would align with the town objectives, because I don't think we have a position on this, do we?
Through the chair, the rally is specifically around Plan 2014.
Right.
So in my recollection, I don't believe council took a formal position on Plan 2014. I know from a staff position, previous staff were involved in terms of when that plan was being developed and keeping abreast of what that plan was. The issues we've seen since Plan 2014 has come into effect, which was around 2017, was that Plan 2014 allows higher levels of lake water, higher lake levels than the previous plan, and as a result, we saw in 2017 and 2019 more flooding than we had seen in previous years. The belief is that it's a result of the regulations in Plan 2014 that allow for higher highs.
Right.
So, what council has not taken a position on that plan itself, but council has taken various positions on different projects or plans, whether that's related to the climate adaptation plan that council currently adopted, that has actions within it that that direct staff to look at shoreline erosion, to look at lake flood levels. So council has taken many positions in relation to whether it be projects related to what engineering is doing.
But not the key position that is tied to this rally. That's my only concern. Like, I get it. Like, listen. Like, I'll tell you my position right now. I also know it's the water levels, but I also don't want to force council to support a rally without a report from staff and then a last thing. What if we change? What if we end up going against what the rally does? Like, that looks like Ajax is flip-flopping on an issue. Is my concern.
So further to the documentation provided to council last night, there was the resolution from the caucus,
The Eastern
Ontario
yeah,
Mayor's
sure,
caucus, and that pretty much outlines exactly where Plan 14 is, and we did have staff take a look at that particular resolution before coming to here, and staff are in agreement with the resolution. You would like to see some added information or work done and added and reviewed as part of the 1958 DD specific plan that would need to be amended to support where we are today. But in principle, staff support that. I mean, it's your option today to look at that further and say you'd like more information on that specific plan. That's fine.
I would move to defer this until after correspondence at council tonight, or today, sorry, right after this, where we can formally endorse that letter. Now council has taken a position, and then we can decide whether we actually want to do this rally or not. But to decide on a rally before we have an official position just seems, again, I don't mind, but again.
But further to that, we were going into this like it's an information session, that there was lots to learn. It was a policy discussion, and there was no commitments as to what our position was. So that's how we were entering it. Like, so there could be conflicting information and positions that come forward at this particular. And I'm going to stop calling it a rally, because if we support it, it's not going to be a rally. It's going to be an information session that allows all kinds of topics to be discussed and information sharing. And one of the projects is just is how to build a sandbank, right? So there's lots of information to be discussed at this public information event.
Again, I sit on CLOCA, like I got the full briefing, but I don't know that the rest of council has, and I just, for their benefit, they may want to wait till we endorse a position before we endorse a rally. Right. But again, that's just my suggestion.
And through the chair, sorry, it was really seeking permission to just continue the conversations with them.
But that's what my first question is, just like, you don't need our permission to have conversations, do you? Like, you need permission to just decide on the rally.
So to express interest in hosting, but only insofar as, like, we haven't decided, right? It's the role of council to make that decision that this aligns with your values. But we needed to come to you in a manner that would be timely, where we're looking at like mid-January dates for these get-togethers, we'll say. So in order to come back to GGC, we're looking at the end of January to do that. So should a position not be endorsed, we can, shelf it.
Right.
But we just needed to come to you at this moment for that reason, that we wouldn't be able to actually promote an event and continue these conversations in a manner that would be timely if we had to wait until January.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at this a little bit differently. I don't think we need to take a position. I think council is very clear in understanding the erosion that we have on our shoreline and the remediation measures that are going to be required to protect our waterfront if we don't do anything. I don't know that we need to actually have a position on that. I think that's something that staff are already very aware of and are looking at. And this is why CLOCA and TRC are doing their shoreline management strategies, because this is a major issue. So I don't think we need to hold off on it. I think this is something, and this is why I sent this to staff to look at, is because, and I've had the opportunity to sit with Ms. Endes and Mr. Romanowski and discuss, Mr. Triron, and discuss the CLOCA shoreline strategies being done between CLOCA, Ganaraska, and Trent. And I can see where the new hazard line is. And there's probably going to be recommendations coming that are going to have some major effects on our shoreline and on some residents that live down there. So I've said this before, this is not climate change. Lake Ontario level is man-made. This is through Plan 2014. And this is something they've been allowed now to, and I'll try and get to a question. They've been allowed to create this, and now they're being allowed to, what's the word they use, to defer something. They're allowed to modify the plan because they're recognizing now the lake levels are too high, but they can only let so much water out, then they gotta shut it down because they're gonna flood out through Montreal if they run it through the winter. So it's a major problem, and I think it's something that we do want to put our name on, because we've already experienced, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's somewhere around 500,000 was taken us so far just to fix the trail sections that have been washed out, and now another 1.6 something million to build an elevated boardwalk, because another section washed out at Rotary Park. Paradise Park flooding every year. All the homes down on Ontario that we're going to find that the hazard is going down the center of their homes. This is a big problem and something we really need to raise aware of. So they've called it a rally in the email. I'll call it a rally, whatever. But it's more about raising awareness for something that I think a lot of people may not actually be aware of is such a massive issue right now. And Plan 2014, I mean, it maybe had good intentions, but I think it's really done the opposite of what they wanted it to do. Maybe it helped downstream, but it sure hasn't helped upstream. So anyway, I would definitely support this. I think they're looking at doing these in January, February. And they're already projecting we're going to have major runoffs again this year. So I think if we hold off, we won't, because there's some things that need to be planned in advance. So if we don't say yes, we want to do this, we want to profile our live examples of what have already happened, I think it'll probably move down the road somewhere else. So I would support approving staff to continue this and moving ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any comments? Okay, Councillor Bauer?
My questions have been answered, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Always nice.
Regional Councillor Dice?
Thank you. So, I don't have a problem having a fulsome conversation and educating people on what the issue is, but from all sides. From what I'm seeing, the stigma around calling it the rally means that there's a political perspective to this, and I think we would be prudent to be very careful how we tread with that way. As everyone has spoken to, the CLOCA presentation, which was really very interesting, and that's one of the questions that I have is, would it be possible to bring that presentation to this council to see, so that we fully understand some of the issues that we're facing, because it did look at a broader range of issues along the shoreline. So this is a really very complicated issue, and I think a lot of us heard about it through March is when the meltdown occurred. We had a massive amount of snow, massive meltdown all at once, and then it rained afterwards. So it's about the amount of runoff that you're getting into your lakes, in Lake Erie, into Lake Ontario. So it's not cut and dry. So these are kind of the discussions that need to happen if we're educating people about these things. It's not just about the dam. So I think we would benefit from having that presentation if that be possible. And then hopefully you come back to with some a little bit more information as to, you know, what they're intending to do at the conference.
Through the chair, if there's not a decision today in terms of moving forward and directing staff to say yes to it, we're not moving forward. Just the timeline is not going to allow for a lot of information sharing and then coming back to council and looking at this to host it. We just don't have the time.
No, I understand that in hosting it, but I mean, there's give and take in both, right? I think they have to recognize too that it's a very complicated system, and that a fulsome discussion is great.
And through
But
the chair,
we don't have all the information we need moving forward because our studies are not complete, and I don't want to be put in that position.
So through the chair, it's council's decision today if you'd like us to move forward, but we will take back your request for information in terms of the CLOCA presentation. We will get that on the agenda for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Sorry, I just, you know,
I'll move the recommendation.
yeah, sorry, you know, staff is just saying that it's our climate emergency and whatnot, and then the mayor just said that it's the water levels are not because of climate. My point is, the town of Ajax doesn't seem to have a concrete position on this, and all I'm saying is that we should wait for that position before we agree to the rally. My point is, can we do the rally another time? Is this a one-time shot? Like, do they not do spring, summer, fall rallies?
Well, through the chair, they are looking at these January, February dates in advance of the spring thaw.
Right.
Right, so that is the intention, to do it early on so that they can tackle emergency preparedness topics, including, you know, making those sandbags and that kind of thing. They do anticipate people from, you know, the Clarington area that were severely impacted as well, all coming together at this one Durham rally location. So I think that was certainly a consideration for them. in terms
So
of
just
timeline.
through the chair to the director of planning, when do you think council will have any sort of report on shoreline, water levels, something like this? Is that something we have to ask for separately, or do you guys have one ready to go for next year in your estimation?
There's another component to that.
2021,
Could you repeat the question?
So just all these questions, like, you know, like of just like a formal report on water levels was never really brought to council to have a position, not a position. So do we know when a report like that will come to council? Will it be sometime next year, 2 years?
Through the chair to the councillor, we haven't been working on anything formally as far as any sort of technical reports, but we can definitely reach out to CLOCA, and because it was a very concise report,
right,
as you saw, and actually TRCA have been working on some water levels and stuff, and actually they've been doing some armoring and remedial works along the Scarborough and the Toronto shoreline. So when we spoke to TRCA about a similar sort of approach along our shoreline, they said they would look into it. So.
Of course.
But we can definitely have CLOCA back here to give the report, and Perry Simonson, who's done a lot of work related to that. And they actually hired an outside consultant to help them with the EA that they're actually in the middle of doing right now. So he can bring forward all those information of all the reports that have been done by the consultant and stuff too. So that's part of that report.
I think that is really necessary with this coming year.
Yeah.
Happy to support the rally. but it's just odd for council to have, to be supporting a rally regarding something we haven't decided on, so that was my overall point, and so.
And through the chair, we'll make that clear.
Yep.
We'll make that clear that we don't have a position, and that if there's support from council, we'd like it to make sure that it's topical and it has very many different discussions occurring at the event.
That'd be great, thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Chair. So just to follow up, I want to confirm what you just said, that if we go ahead and provide support that you're asking for, you can go to the table and sort of say, this is how we would like, Ajax would like, our hosting opportunity to look like. These topics, these people, this format, so that we're not just we are engaging what we know and what we stand for and what we want to educate people on. And not necessarily just something we don't know.
Sure. Yes.
So I want to confirm that that's the conversation that we would go in with.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And it's also an opportunity for us to learn too, because there's the speakers that are anticipated to come are policy speakers, and they will be experts in certain areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, once again, Regional Councillor Dias.
Just a quick question, did we not, during the flood alert, post TRC's warnings and risk warnings?
Through the chair, yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
So maybe we could have a look at one of those, because they were very descriptive in what was happening as well. That might help with information with council.
So the issue of flood warning hazards in certain degrees, and they'll post what those degrees of hazards are.
But if I remember correctly too, there was a lot of information, and some they were on the news, they were on the radio, they were everywhere. But there was a lot of information as to the cause and their prediction. So that might help
Yeah.
if we can find that. Send it out. Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor
Just
Bauer.
to follow up my other question, it also, you go into the discussion knowing full well, if it's not what we want, you're not doing it. We're not doing it.
Exactly.
Correct? Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yep. I'll take a stand so I can read this. Mayor Collier has moved to approve recommendation for this report that staff be directed to communicate to the town's interest to United Shoreline, Ontario, to host a rally in Ajax in early 2020, and 2, if successful, staff be given authority to coordinate and implement the event.
Just to speak to it quickly, Chair.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I brought this forward and moved it because this is also about raising awareness and putting our particular issues I want to put ahead of other people's issues, which is I absolutely trust staff. We've done a lot of these campaigns, we'll call them before, whether it be Save the Waterfront, whether it be the casino or any of these things, and they've been not all successful, but definitely raise awareness. So this is more about raising awareness than really even, we know we have the problem. Let's elevate the status, because we're asking for the province and for the regulators to take notice. If we don't make a big noise about it, people aren't gonna take notice. So to me, that's all this is about, is raising awareness of our issues we have right now.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. So, having said that, Mayor, and I agree with you, can we change the word in your amendment? We can take out rally. Since we've all talked about it saying it's not a rally, we're gonna call it something else. We're directing it as something else.
To host an event?
If you call it whatever you want, call it an event.
So let's not call it a rally then.
It's a rally, but we'll call it an event.
Yes.
Well, that goes back to my initial, concern about a rally. It's a single issue. What's the purpose of the rally, right? And you have to be very careful. We don't have all the information before us, and you don't want to be taking.
I would take that as a friendly amendment to call it an event.
Sorry?
I would take that as a friendly amendment to call it an event. Rather than a rally.
We'll change it to event.
I think we just have to be prudent about the information we don't have moving forward and make sure it is that full discussion around the table. So yes, thank you.
And just the chair, question, what do we think this is going to cost?
Actually, they have only requested in-kind use of space, something that would hold up to that 500 person kind of mark. So
I anticipate that we would request use of Audley Recreation Center. And the only other optional service that they have requested in kind would be live streaming, which we do have the capability to do in-house. They did not request any catering or anything like that, so nothing out of
Yeah.
pocket.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
You haven't changed it? Okay. Thank you, everyone. So this is all done. Mayor, Collier.
I'm voting.
Oh, okay, yeah. Those in favor?
Of the friendly change of the.
Any opposed? It carries. Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Madison had the answer for that question. I think she's waiting for the 500 mark. Yes. Okay, now that we're moving out of consent agenda and we have no items up for discussion, neither do we have any presentations. So I need a mover to go into closed session. And moved by Councillor Bauer. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Yeah, let's take a break.
Yeah, let's take a
Motion carries.
Now we need to wrap.
What do I have to do now?
Motion to ratify?
Oh, motion to ratify. Those in favor?
Who's moving it?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Councilor, Regional Councilor Dice. Okay, those in favor? Those opposed? Carries.
Yeah, motion to adjourn.
Do I now get a motion to adjourn? Those in favor?
I'll
Any
do it.
opposed?
I'll do it.
Councilor Bauer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
And now we're in council.
Okay.
Thanks, Sean.
Can we start council at 4 o'clock? Because Jen is leaving at 4, and that's what I just wanted to catch her before